and welcome. This is Lois, and you're watching Knit Bits. Today, we're going to continue our conversation about knitting patterns and the overview for that. I thought we'd spend a little bit of time today talking about the differences in knitting patterns and if there's any kind of standard for those. So, when you're new, it can feel kind of really overwhelming because there's all these patterns available that say that they're beginner knitter patterns. And so you might pick one up and be like, okay, this is the pattern for me because it's for a beginner. And then you get into it and it's really complicated, or it seems like there's information missing. And so are there standards for pattern writing? The answer to that is yes. The Craft Yarn Council does have guidelines for publishing patterns, whether they're self-published or if you're publishing them in a publication. And so there are standards. However, you can design a pattern with as little or as much information as you want. There's no one policing this sort of thing, right? So I could put out a pattern that just says, cast on 12 stitches and knit for 10 inches and seam together. And that could be the entire pattern, but it doesn't really give you a lot of information, right? And so you also have different skills of knitters that are creating patterns. So you might have someone who's pretty new and they maybe don't know all the different things in the pattern mean, so they just kind of skip those things. And then you might have somebody who's really advanced and they know everything, so they include all the information. Or you even have people who are advanced who are like, it's not that big of a deal, so I'm only going to include this information because this is what matters. It really is the designer's choice. I like to think about pattern writing similar to creating a recipe, right? You can make a recipe that just has the list of ingredients and maybe the temperature that you cook it at and call it a day. Or you could have somebody who's super into cooking and they're going to give you so much information, like how high to have the stove and then how to turn it down and when to add the salt and all of that information, very, very precise, because they are all about the details of the cooking. And I think that's the same thing that happens in pattern writing. So the more specific a designer is about those little nuanced details, the more they're going to provide that. And the less they are concerned about those details, the less they're going to provide it. So that's kind of why patterns are really different when we get to them. Tomorrow, we're going to take a look at pattern skill level because, as I just mentioned earlier, there's tons of patterns out there that say they're for beginners, and I wouldn't qualify all of those as beginner patterns. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow, why that happens, and what's going on there. I'll see you then.